Good day and welcome to Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. I am your host, Rondell, Donawa, attorney at law. Of course, you can stream us at wesncc.com and on all platforms. I am happy once again to be here, and we have a very packed show. And we'll go right into it because, of course, you would know from the promo, I'm speaking about Parliament and the law-making process. Now, you would ask a simple question: what are laws? Now, each country has its own laws, and Trinidad and Tobago is no exception. And as a nation, it has its own laws. So according to the Trinidad and Tobago Parliament's website, it states, and I would read, all organizations need rules to function. Society, as the most complex of organizations, need a large variety of rules to govern relations between members. Because society is constantly changing, these rules need regular updating, and new rules need to be made to meet new circumstances. Now, the Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago is the supreme institution by virtue of the Constitution that makes the laws. How are laws passed, one may ask? Now, before we get into our guest, we know that laws are passed in the Red House. We know that, let's put up the photo of the historical context of images of the Red House. Now, this was the first building of the government campus. Before, they used to call it the government buildings. And this building was nicknamed the Red House in 1897 by members of the public when it was painted red to commemorate the Diamond Jubilee of the Queen Victoria, and the name has endured. Now, the second image is an image of the Parliament when it was burnt. Of course, that would have been thereafter. And on the left, you can see the edge of the old fire station building, which also stands today. Now, the third image is the Red House today. Of course, you would know that it was restored in 2020 and reopened in 2020, this historical building as we know, the Red House. And one may have seen that the next photo, this would have been the previous House chamber, where many parliamentarians, current and former, would have sat. And of course, the final image is inside the refurbished House chamber, which is now the very bougie and very current chamber of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. Of course, that is a historical context. Now, my in-studio guest today will be discussing Parliament and the lawmaking process. She is none other than Miss Chantal La Roche. I hope I get it correctly. Chantal La Roche is an attorney at law. She has worked at the Office of the Parliament since 2010. She's now the Senior Legal Officer of Parliament, and she provides apolitical advice to the presiding officers and members of Parliament to support them in the performance of their duties. She's an experienced lecturer and tutor, and she has also served as facilitator and trainer for both the national and regional youth parliaments. And it's only yesterday I realized, and I was speaking to her, how famous she is, because a lot of her proteges, youth parliamentarians, are locked on. So good morning to you. Good morning, Chantal.
Good morning to you, Rondell. Thank you very much for the invitation. And I have to start off with a good morning to the youth parliamentarians, of course. They're all locked in and viewing. And to my team at the Office of the Parliament, it really is a privilege to be invited to speak about the process of lawmaking, to give some insight and some information. I know many people walk past that majestic Red House and They want to know what happens in there, you know. And citizen outreach is one of our strategic objectives at the Office of the Parliament, because citizen participation is an essential element of democracy. And so any opportunity we have to explain, to share what happens at the Office of the Parliament, we're always pleased to do so. And
I would like to thank you, of course, and thank the authorities that be for having you here. Now, I know you are apolitical, so therefore we will speak strictly about the laws and what Parliament is entails. Now, we know that the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago is bicameral. Could you explain to those who may not know what bicameral or what that bicameral system is?
Yes, so the Constitution in section 39 establishes what the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago is. And bicameral simply means that it's two chambers or two houses, which is why we have a House of Representatives, which is our elected group, the persons you go to the election in the voting booth to put your finger by your symbol of choice. And then we have the Senate, which are the appointed members. So we have two chambers or two houses. It's similar to many other countries. So for example, the UK, we have the UK House of Commons and the House of Lords. And the Constitution also establishes that the President is an element of the legislature. So our legislature is really the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago,
yes,
the House of Representatives, and the Senate. And bicameral simply means you have two houses.
Now, many people will ask why there are two houses. What's the difference between the House of Representatives and the Senate?
Yes, there is a school of thought that we don't need a Senate.
Yes.
It's referred to as the upper house or the House of Sober Reflection. It's really intended to be a check and balance, one over the other. Whether that holds today is a matter of opinion, but it really is intended, one, to be a reviewer or a check and balance on the other.
Right. So therefore, so is it that laws would, basically, bills will commence in the House of Representatives and then conveyed to the Senate?
Great question. So a bill could actually start in either the House of Representatives or the Senate. What makes it check and balance is that it must go through the same process in each house. So if it starts in the House of Representatives and it goes through all of its stages, it must then go to the Senate and follow the same stages and vice versa. So that's how one is kind of like a reviewer or a check of the other.
Right, so let's tell the public, how are laws created? We know it's in Parliament, but what is the procedure to start to present a bill of Parliament?
Okay, so even before you get to the stage of a bill, as I like to explain to persons who have never interacted with Parliament before, it has to start with an idea or a problem. You're not going to need a law for something that isn't an issue in the society or isn't a problem. So for example, right now, with COVID-19, we would not have needed any COVID-19 related laws before last year because COVID-19 didn't exist.
Yes.
So it usually starts with some issue, some problem that needs to be solved, or you have an existing law that needs to be updated or changed. So for example, with social media, you didn't have that problem before. You have laws that deal with computers, and so when computers had a big back, now you have to deal with newer issues in relation to use of computers. So it usually starts or commences with some problem,
yes,
to be identified, some idea. From that problem, your government or executive is going to look and say, listen, we need to regulate this thing. We need some rules to govern whatever the issue is. So the government is going to formulate a policy. It usually starts in the ministry with responsibility for the issue. So if the issue is COVID-19, obviously the Ministry of Health is going to get together and say, how do we get laws to treat with COVID-19? And from there, then you get to, so even before the bill comes to us, it has to start with some issue in your society, yes, some problem, something.
And this will be ministry related, meaning that a ministry is the one who would formulate that statute.
So if we had more time,
yes,
I could tell you about the different types of bills. You have public bills,
yes,
which are government bills,
yes,
but you also have private bills that are related to specific members of society that will affect only a small group. So if you want to incorporate Rondell, Donawa football group, you may want to do it via private bill, but we don't have time to go into different types of bills. But the majority of bills that come to us are government bills. So the government is driving the policy because, of course, they have been mandated by the society to tell us how to govern ourselves for 5 years.
Yes,
yeah?
and as you were saying, it starts with what is the society needs, and then what happens thereafter? So
usually, once a policy is formulated, instructions will be given to the drafting department, which is known as the CPC in the Attorney General's ministry, to draft a draft law.
And the CPC is, sorry, so forget.
Chief Parliamentary Counsel,
We are
sorry.
lawyers,
Yes, I'm going
the
to
public
use,
may not know.
Chief Parliamentary Counsel,
Yes.
it's the drafting department. It's a department of lawyers whose specialty is drafting legislation. They would be given the instructions to draft based on whatever policy has been decided on a particular issue. Draft a bill. So a bill is basically a draft of a law, right? So you're doing a first draft to see what possibly could be, how could we regulate a particular thing. So the most current or topical bill that we have out there right now is the one that's proposing an amendment to the Constitution in relation to Tobago's self-governance.
Yes.
That would have started with consultations. It would have started with the government sitting to see what policy does Tobago want to be independent? Does it want to be its own island away from Trinidad? Does it want to be a federation? Does it want to be self-governing? So in formulating the policy, the government is going to evaluate what does the society want, what's best for the country, what's happening out there in other countries that's similar to ours. So for example, you have Scotland that's having a similar issue.
Yes.
St. Kitts and Nevis, multi-island country. So you look to see what's out there and what suits us best, and then they will draft the draft law or what we call a bill to be discussed or considered by Parliament.
Right, and that draft bill will be tabled, as you said, in the House of Representatives or the Senate.
Or the Senate.
So let's say, for instance, it's the House of Representatives. Mm-hmm. It comes into the House of Representatives. Mm-hmm. Who tables that bill? Right.
So the person who tables or presents a bill is usually the minister in charge of the bill, and that would be the minister whose portfolio the bill falls under. So, as I said before, COVID-19, Minister of Health. If constitutional amendment, it will usually be the Attorney General, and so on. So, a minister is usually piloting the bill or placed in charge of the bill and will drive the bill through all of its stages. Yeah?
Right. So the minister drives the bill. So, what are the stages?
Perfect. So, each bill has to go through, as I said, stages in each house. So the very first stage is called the first reading or introduction. And it's more or less a procedural step. So the bill is announced, the short title, which is the name by which the bill will be known, is announced by the clerk, usually the clerk of the house, who is those persons that you see sitting in front of the speaker.
Yes.
Procedural officers will announce the name of the bill and the name of the minister who is in charge of the bill. And that is how it comes to the attention of the members of the Parliament to know, listen, the government is coming with a bill to amend the Constitution, right? So that's how you know, the Constitutional Tobago Amendment Bill 2020.
Yes.
It's also how it comes to the attention of the public, because you want to know what is Parliament doing. It's announced, it's then published, and then as a public you have access to read what's in this draft law, what's in this proposed legislation. So that's the first step, is first reading and introduction.
Yes.
After that, and of course the standing orders provide for a certain number of days for things to happen, but the next stage is the second reading of a bill. Now it's called second reading, but really and truly it's where the excitement happens. That's when the debate happens, right?
And you have the crosstalk.
You have the excitement, you go through the bill. Yes. And you say, I don't want Tobago to be an independent country on its own. I want Tobago to stay with Trinidad. Or I think Tobago is ready to be independent, or whatever your arguments are. At the second reading stage is where you debate the merits and demerits of a proposed legislation. So that's where the most excitement happens, yeah? The next stage is usually the committee stage. And I'll say usually because we've amended our standing orders in such a way that a bill can be referred to a committee right after it's read for a first time.
Okay.
Or after that second reading stage. So the government has options depending on what's happening or what type of legislation it is. So for instance, something as important and heavy as the bill to amend the constitution for self-governance of Tobago,
yeah.
it was immediately sent to a select committee once it was first read.
Is it that to speed up the process?
It's to allow consultation, it's to allow involvement, it's to ensure that you go through this thing and you understand its complexities. Are we going in the right direction? It may allow you to bring in experts or consultants to help with the bill. It's a way to ensure that you take shorter steps and careful steps before you pass legislation.
Yes.
Some things are simpler. If you just you're amending one word in one existing piece of legislation, 2 clauses, you don't need to go to a committee for that. But when things are more complex, you'll find that a bill is usually referred to a select committee one time. You're not even going to go into the merits and demerits just yet. You allow the select committee to do that.
And is this committee where, the parliamentarians sit down, the speaker is in front, where the clerk is, and each person go through line by line?
Oh, that's a different committee.
Okay.
I'm going to come to that. Oh,
okay.
Rondell has been doing his homework
yes.
and his reading, clearly. Yes, so at the select committee, it's a smaller group of parliamentarians. So select meaning you've selected a few from either side, from both parties.
That's joint? What do you call joint select?
Some of them are called joint select, yes. Joint select means that you've taken some from the Senate and some from the House of Representatives. Okay. Select committees can also only be House members or Senate members. So the general term for it is select committees.
Yes.
But if they are sitting jointly, some from the Senate and some from the House, then you have a joint select committee. And it's usually more so a joint select committee at this stage, first reading. So we've given you this draft legislation, go off and have a look at it, and come back and tell us if you've made any changes, what do you think? And then we debate it at second reading. Yes. If it goes off after second reading, because second reading is where you've discussed the merits and demerits already, when you send it off, it's really only to look to see certain clauses can be changed, certain things can be tightened, fixed, etc. That committee that you refer to is the committee of the whole House.
Okay.
And that's an important step as well. Once second reading has been completed, usually bills go straight to that committee of the whole setup. So the speaker comes down from her chair and sits as the chairman of a committee. And it's really more casual. If you tune in at any time, you'll realize they're talking to each other. Yeah. It's a lot less formal because it's intended to be a discussion. And that's when you go through clause by clause, line by line, move a comma here, move a word here. And then after that stage, the committee must report, which is the next step, report to the chamber what has happened in that committee. And it may seem weird. I mean, you were all just sitting here. Why are you going back to report? But
and this is report in writing?
Report orally.
Orally.
So you're coming to say, during this committee stage, we moved this, or we amended this, or we didn't amend anything. Okay. But you must report back to the chamber what you've done. It's a formality, seems weird, but that's how it works. And then after that report is made, then you go to the third reading and then to the passage of the bill. And then those steps must be repeated in the next House. So if it started in the House of Representatives, it then goes off to the Senate, first reading, second reading, third reading, report, etc. Right? But you must have all of those steps in each House in order for a bill to be validly passed. If you miss a step, if you only do it in one House, you don't have law just yet. You're still at draft stage.
Now, you speak about pass. Bills have to be passed. Now, now, in terms of the majority, now I know that there are discussions on special majority or simple majority. Could you just explain the concept of what type of bills require simple or what is simple majority?
Sure. The type of bill that will require what we call a special majority is usually one that is either interfering with I want to be as simple as I can.
Of the Constitution.
I want to be as simple as I can, yes. Right? If the bill is proposing something that is in contravention of sections 4 and 5 of the Constitution, then it can't be that just half or a majority of the members can say, okay, women can't wear pants anymore, right? I'm interfering with, you can't go to church anymore. I'm interfering with one of your rights in the Constitution. And the Constitution being our supreme law, all our laws must be in conformity with the Constitution.
Yes.
So anytime you're proposing something that is going to interfere with those Section 4 and 5 rights, then you need a special majority. In addition to which, if you are proposing a law that is going to try to amend the Constitution itself, you also need a special majority. So for example, and it's going to be my example all throughout, the bill that's being proposed right now to amend the Constitution to give Tobago self-governance will require 3/4 of the members of the House to approve it and 2/3 of the members of the Senate.
Oh,
so
wow.
it requires, because it is proposing to amend the Constitution itself.
Yes.
So you can't just go around willy-nilly passing laws and, all right, no, we don't want them to go to church, we don't want them to assemble, right? We are democracy, and those majorities are built in order to protect us as citizens and in order to ensure that members of Parliament don't just come in and fling away a constitution that you honor so much, yeah?
Which can be challenged in the courts,
which
of course.
Can be always challenged.
And now the simple majority, what type of ratio are you looking at if you have to pass?
Simple majority is simply half plus one.
Okay, so it's
a majority. So it's 2 of us, a majority would be 2. Right? 3 of us, a majority would still be 2 because it will be more than half. Yeah?
So the government of the day, once it's a simple majority, they will always have the simple majority,
that's
whichever
correct.
Government is
that's correct.
Is there.
And that's how it works. It's not just Trinidad. I know people tend to think,
we are the Westminster system.
We have inherited a Westminster system, and the reason for that is the government that has been mandated by society to govern for 5 years.
Basic social studies, guys.
Basic but you know, not everyone is aware, so
of course.
You try to help.
Now, if a bill is passed in the House, so it's passed as a majority in the House, but not in the Senate, what becomes of that
Well, that's
bill?
what's so special about our setup. Our Senate is unique, because it's not just government and opposition. We also have an independent bench.
Yes.
And the numbers are such that if you don't get support in the Senate, your bill dies, right? It must pass House and Senate. Unfortunately, if you're unable to get that support that you need in the Senate, the 2/3 that's required, bill dies, and you have to come back again a long time. You can't just bring it back next week.
Wow.
The standing orders say when a bill can be brought back, and it's usually not for 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah.
So that's the purpose of an independent Senate bench.
It is, because again, check and balance.
Of course.
I don't belong to either party, so I don't have anything
Rule of law.
to gain or lose if I don't support a piece of legislation. If I'm seeing it from an independent lens, I may not support it. I may say, no, you all need to go wheel and come again with this one, yeah?
Wheel and come again, yes.
But if it doesn't pass in the Senate, the bill unfortunately has to die.
And it passes, what becomes now after it passes?
Right, so upon passage, once you've successfully taken a bill through both houses, House and Senate, the next step is assent. And in order for a draft law to be converted into law, into an act of Parliament. So it's a bill going through. In order for it to transform into law that can govern us, it must be assented to by, well, now Her Excellency.
Her Excellency.
Yes, I love to say it, Her Excellency, which involves the President actually signing it, physically signing a bill and placing a seal, a nice big red seal. I tried to find one, but too complicated to bring something like that here, but that's how it becomes law. Now, from time to time, you will find that even though a bill is assented to immediately upon passage, it may not immediately come into effect. And those provisions are usually built into a bill.
Okay.
So if, for example, a government is ready to pass a piece of legislation, let's say, for example, the one that's being done for the transformation of the court system, but the courts haven't been built. So you pass your legislation first, but you build in there a provision that allows you some time before it becomes effective or before it is proclaimed.
Okay.
So that's another one you hear in the media all the time, proclamation.
And that's when it's gazetted?
No. So proclamation means you've placed in your bill a provision that says this will only become effective upon proclamation by the President. So the proclamation itself is gazetted as well, but the bill is gazetted, assented to, and everything. It's on the books but it's not in effect until that proclamation is done. It could be a year from now, it could be 6 days from now. It really depends on what the circumstances are of the bill.
Is there a limitation period to proclaim a bill?
There are bills on the books right now acts of parliament, that are yet to be proclaimed.
Wow. This is no fault of Her Excellency.
Not at all, not at all. So for example, the dangerous dogs legislation has never been proclaimed.
Wow.
Interestingly, yes. There's no, unfortunately, time period for a bill to be brought into effect. Once it's assented to, it's on the books, but it can only govern you once it has been proclaimed. If it's one of those that has a proclamation clause. Now, if you don't have that provision in your bill, then once it's assented to by Her Excellency, it's an act of parliament, you're governed by it. It doesn't matter if you didn't know about seatbelts and you didn't know about, right?
Pay your fine.
Pay your fine, pay your fee, yeah? But once a proclamation clause is built in there, it gives the executive some time to put things in place if need be.
And the executive meaning the government.
The executive being the government,
yes.
That's correct.
Chantal, we are out of time.
We are?
Yes, we are.
I could talk all
I know. I wanted to speak about
youth
parliament because I understand you are very, very instrumental in that. But I think we have to come back.
Yes, yes. Yes.
I think we have to come back to that.
Yes.
So thank you very much for appearing. I appreciate it. And we appreciate that, WSN. CC, and give your colleagues at Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago my regards.
I shall, and thank you again for inviting us.
Thank you.
I'm sure we'll be free to bring someone else
to
talk some more about Parliament.
We shall bring you.
Yes.
But thank you so much. You have been watching WESN, Content Capital, Strictly Legal. I am your host, Rondell Donawa. Do have a great week ahead. God bless.